Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Greg Ramsey. From 400 years in the past, he is one of the immortals, a man who cannot perish except by beheading, and though he is a highly skilled warrior, he wants nothing more than to live his life in peace until he is forced back into a deadly game of survival, because in the end, there can be only one. We're talking about Highlander, the series. The Highlander TV series starring Adrian Paul premiered in American as well as international syndication in October of 1992 and is a continuation of the story introduced in the Highlander films starring Christopher Lambert as Connor MacLeod. Paul was initially going to portray Connor, but fearing too many comparisons to Lambert's performance, asked to play an original character instead. As a result of this change, Paul portrayed Duncan MacLeod, an immortal born in 1592 who was part of Connor's clan in Scotland. Duncan achieved immortality in 1622 and was mentored by Connor a few years later. Lambert reprised his role as Connor in the show's first episode, where he tried to convince Duncan to return to the game, the hunt involving all immortals in a battle of good and evil. Duncan instead wanted to live a normal life alongside his girlfriend Tessa Noel, portrayed by Alexandra Vandernoot. The two owned an antique store and were often involved in situations in which Duncan had to kill other immortals that he came into contact with. The show depicted Duncan's past in flashbacks, which included him living different lives in different countries, often sporting an accent native to those countries. Duncan was a brave and noble character whose exploits led the show to become a hit with both critics and the fans. That was thanks in large part to the show's soundtrack provided by the legendary band Queen and the charismatic Paul himself, who threw himself into the role, becoming the face of the Highlander universe. The Highlander series boasted a wide array of guest stars during its run, including The Who's frontman Roger Daltrey, pro wrestler Roddy Piper, and musicians like Sheena Easton and Joan Jett. The consensus opinion among critics is that the show improved from season to season, with the fifth year being the creative peak of the show. The sixth and final season was not well received, but it was not the end of Duncan MacLeod, as Paul returned in Highlander Endgame and Highlander The Source. The Highlander series ran for 119 episodes from 1992 to 1998 and remains one of the most popular action sci-fi fantasy shows of all time. And that's the lowdown on Highlander, the series. So this is an episode we've been talking about doing behind the scenes for a while. This is your cup of tea. This is your genre and this is your area of expertise. And you've got a lot of them. This is not the only one, obviously. But if it comes to, okay, let's have a discussion from top to bottom on a particular subject, whether it's a movie, TV, comic book, music album, whatever it is, much like in the vein of Metallica, this is one subject where you can school me quite a bit. And, of course, it's Highlander the series. You got attached to this thing really early, man. Why was that?
Well, yeah, I would have to say it's because of Adrian Paul himself. Loved the music by Queen.
Awesome music.
Perfect.
Awesome soundtrack.
And but Adrian Paul, for me, makes the series. Got a decent supporting cast. I wouldn't say great, but just enough to, help Duncan carry to the sixth and final season. And I think me and my dad both agreed that, he was perfect for the series. And also, we watched the series straight through at least twice, I know, after I bought the DVDs. And I know the last time we finished up, it was 2012. And I asked him, I said, when do you want to watch it again? I was just kind of laughed and joked about it, but, we were serious. And he just threw out a number. He said, how about 2017? I was like, all right, it's going to be, let's make it a date. Unfortunately, he passed on before then, and, just to be serious for a minute, and never got to watch it again. So, but I remember when we were getting ready for the funeral, my niece asked me, he says, we were trying to put together a picture collage. You know how people do that for, when somebody passes on to celebrate their life.
Of course.
Yeah, and she asked me, says, what do you think would be good to put in that collage? And one of the first things that came to my mind was something to do with Highlander, like not necessarily a picture of Adrian Paul as Duncan MacLeod, but just something with the Highlander name on it. Maybe lightning catching on a sword or something like that. I think that's what the photo was. Maybe from a distance, it was a figure holding up a sword and the lightning coming out. So I thought that was pretty appropriate, and I'm pretty sure he would have approved.
Dude, that's awesome. And, like a lot of us growing up as a nerd or geek or, fanboy or whatever the terminology you want to use, I mean, a lot of this stuff, we actually got from our dads. And in some cases our moms too, I guess, depending on who you're talking about here. But, my dad and I bonded over comic books. And I didn't have as much time with mine as you did yours, obviously. But, the fact that you got to bond with him over this, and I'm sure a great many other things, I mean, that's something you'll always have with you. And memories are important, man. And when I started doing research for this episode, I thought I knew, I can't say quite a bit about this series. I would say I thought I knew some. I didn't realize how much I didn't know. And the Highlander series was always something that was sort of in my peripheral when it was on TV. And it debuted in 92, right? So I was always kind of aware it was there, and I would catch an occasional episode. But as far as, okay, here's a new episode on a Tuesday, next Tuesday's the next one. I mean, that wasn't me. I didn't follow it like religiously. But man, I'll tell you, and I'm not just saying this because we're doing this episode. I'm 16 episodes into the first season. I'm determined to finish this thing for the entire show. It is not as bad as I kind of feared it was going to be. I think this show has aged pretty well over the years.
I agree totally. I mean, and I think it's even better, probably better than some shows that are, coming out today, to this day. I remember when we watched the DVDs, I mean, I love the music that goes along with it so much that I would how you can, fast forward to right when the episode begins.
Oh, yeah.
Some people probably do that. With this, I just let the intro begin and the music, because I could never get enough of it.
And, we can't go any farther without me. I don't want to leave you hanging on your point earlier. You are absolutely right that Adrian Paul is pitch perfect. And dude, underrated. He's so underrated, not just for this show, but as an actor. Dude, he is good. I mean, what am I, judging the Oscars over here, right? I'm just a fan like you are, like a lot of us are. But man, our BS meter for stuff like this, not just for TV, but movies and what have you, it's pretty high. I mean, I think you and I can both agree on that. We can smell a dud from a mile away. You just see it. And this guy's not a dud. At any given moment, he's the best part of this show. I mean, the characters around him could be the most unbelievable things you've ever seen. And he centers this show. He's the anchor for this entire story, really.
I'm right there with you. Adrian Paul, before the show came out, of course, I didn't know who he was. And he, like I said, he's one of the main attractions that, drew me and my dad to watch.
Right.
And you talk about very underrated. Again, yeah, I agree. And I was really disappointed that he didn't go on to much bigger and better things after the series. I think when the series was finally said and done, he went on to another series called Tracker, which was, I believe, he was a vampire hunter in that.
That sounds familiar.
I never did. I don't think I got to watch any of that, but it didn't last long.
Yeah, and again, he wasn't the first choice to play Duncan MacLeod. I mean, and as we know, and I can't swear that I knew this, I'm sure you probably already knew this show was supposed to be about Connor MacLeod. This was supposed to be about Christopher Lambert's character from the first Highlander film. that was the deal. But Christopher Lambert had no interest in doing TV. He just didn't want to do it. So they said, well, we'll just recast him. And he was on board, and he's like, I'll pass the torch, as it were, and that kind of thing, and sign off on it. But they go through the entire casting process, which included Mark Singer, which was something you tipped me off to a couple days ago, which honestly I had no idea he was up for the part, honestly.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that, in season 1, he appears in one of the episodes, Mountain Men.
Yes.
And I thought it was nice that they, at least asked him to, come back and be in an episode. And I thought it was gracious of him to accept a role, even though he'd been turned down for a starring role.
And, let's face it, I like Mark Singer. And I told you the other day that I first discovered Singer like a lot of other people did on V, the series in the 1980s, which at the time was groundbreaking, and it was a gigantic smash hit. But that was my first interaction with him. Then later, of course, he portrayed the Beastmaster and did a lot of other projects after that as well. I can't see him doing this part. And he would have had, physically, he probably would have been able to handle it, probably did a lot of his own stunt work back in the day. And honestly, dude, Christopher Lambert, I mean, I'm not seeing it. When I look at Adrian Paul, I see a European, very ethnic, if I can use that word. He just doesn't look like, okay, here's a white-blooded American, or, red-blooded American man. That's not what I see when I look at Adrian Paul. I see someone with an international flavor, which I believe, that really the Highlander should have.
Absolutely. It was a part ready-made for him. And maybe that's another part of the character that drew me to, the show was the international flavor. We talked about they go on site in Paris and film part of a season. Actually they keep going back and forth between the States and Paris, which, I love that because, you never know what to expect from, this series. And I think Adrian Paul, was right at home in this show.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And that's part of any great, perfect casting, as it were, is the actor in question comfortable in his own skin? When you look at him, do you see the actor or do you see the role he's playing? And that's the issue, in my opinion, with going after big name actors for roles such as this. Had they gone after, I don't know, a big name actor for this part, would you have seen Duncan or would you have seen the actor? So to me, this guy completely embodied who Duncan MacLeod was and is, and I can't sing his praises enough. Ironically, though, he was not the first choice. As we said, Mark Singer was up for the part, for sure. The part was actually given to a Dutch actor named Dirk de Lint, but he actually left the project for unknown reasons. I didn't dig any further to see what led to that. Basically, Adrian beat out 400 hopefuls in the U.S., Europe, and Canada for the role. And as we said, this show was written for the character of Connor MacLeod, created by Gregory Wyden, who gets full credit during the series for creating the Highlander character, for sure. That movie was released in 1986. So here comes a good question, all right? So did you discover the series first or the film first? Which came first for you?
I was aware of the film, but didn't have any interest in, watching it. But when the series came around, like I said, I think it was Adrian Paul and the flashbacks and the international flavor, as we said. I think all of that together, but mainly Adrian Paul, is why I checked it out, and I never regretted it.
Yeah, honestly, for me, it was the opposite. I was aware of the movie first, and I haven't seen the movie in a long time, the actual first movie. Did it not start out with a pro wrestling match at the beginning of the film?
Oh, yeah, it did. It was the Fabulous Freebirds.
That's right.
Against the Tonga Kid, and I can't remember who the other guy was. It was just a guy, an obscure guy in a pair of trunks and boots. But, yeah, I thought that was really cool. Connor's sitting in a packed stadium full of fans and screaming, you can't hear anything else going on. But as he's watching the match going on, he's having a flashback of his first life back in the Scottish Highlands, and he's getting ready to go into battle with his kinsmen. and that's where the movie begins. And he senses, out of the blue, he senses another immortal in the crowd, and then of course they go into the parking garage and fight it out with their swords. But yeah,
that's right. That's coming back to me now. Yeah.
Yeah, just that correlation to professional wrestling. Yeah, that was pretty cool, I thought.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. Now, I mean, the Highlander film was not exactly a success. It didn't get the best reviews of all time, but there was enough meat on the bone to create this series, to spin this thing off. And as we said, it could have been anybody else but Paul, who of course brought the role home. Imagine for a minute, though, and it's fun to play the what if sometimes. What if Lambert had said yes and Duncan MacLeod had never been created and this show would have starred Connor MacLeod? I just wonder, would it have gone for 6 years? Could it have gone more, less? Would it have been as compelling? I mean, there's no way to know. But at the same time, if Paul caught your eye like he caught mine and a lot of other fans out there, I mean, would Lambert have been able to do the same thing, or would it have been dismissed as, oh, it's a follow-up to that bad movie?
Yeah, I often think about that myself. Me personally, I just don't think it would have had as much success. I could be wrong, but I was really thrown off when I read that about the character was supposed to have been a clone of Connor MacLeod, and I thought to myself, why would they want to do that? Why would they want to make it the same character? Why not? It turned out great the way they did it with a different character, but same clan, different vintage. What they say in the show, I believe, and they say, I remember watching some of the Highlander extras on the DVDs, and the writers and directors, some of the writers and directors were talking about they wanted to dress Duncan MacLeod a certain way. Yeah, they wanted him to look a certain way, kind of like with a trench coat, like Connor. And Adrian Paul said no. Says this is how I see the character. And the writer, I remember the writer saying this. He said Adrian fought for his character, and I love that.
That's awesome. And dude, just imagine that you're the guys behind this show. And here comes Adrian Paul, who was a hopeful for this part. He wasn't exactly a household name, and he's telling you, no, that's not what my character would do. He would dress like this and talk like this. And you're like, excuse me? I mean, that takes a lot of guts, man. So that's pretty cool.
But I'm glad they listened,
Absolutely. Because that, and you can't emphasize this enough, how much of a job he did. I mean, just like I said, he just completely brought this home. He wasn't the only star of the show. As you mentioned, his ensemble cast, or the cast around him earlier, I should say. Two primary characters that we had to talk about. Tessa Noel, who was his love interest. And, we got to tell anyone listening to this episode right now, if you wanted to check out the series, but have been on the fence about it, or haven't seen it in years, or maybe you want to watch it for the first time, you're probably going to get some spoilers in this particular episode, so just brace yourself for that. And honestly, dude, you're going to spoil some stuff for me too, but it's all good. I intend on watching the series, whatever you tell me, but she was the love interest, and I found it very interesting how he was immediately paired with someone from the very jump. He wasn't a loner. He wasn't, roaming the earth. He wasn't traveling. He was stationary. He was in one spot with this woman who he loved, who he was with, and continued to stay with her. Like I said, I'm 16 episodes in the first season, but she's still there. She's still a character. They could have very well have done the Incredible Hulk route, where he's traveling from one city to the next, from one country to the next, killing immortals and doing his thing and being in the game and all that. But instead, he wants to have a normal life. I mean, that's kind of a different twist for a character like this, wouldn't you think?
Oh yeah, I'm glad they began the series like that. Not only is she a beautiful woman, you got a French accent, which is always sexy. Love that. And I think she compliments Adrian really good. She's got a strong will. She's not just a pretty face.
Right.
I remember the first episode. No, I'm like you. I'm going back and watching the episodes. I'm on somewhere in season 1. I'm probably just a little bit behind you, but that first episode, I love it because they're talking about, having a normal life, and she's like saying, maybe I want to grow old with somebody. And of course, Duncan comes back and says, "You want someone younger,"
Right.
That was great. Yeah. And he says, I remember he said, "Don't you think I wanted the same thing?" So, like you said, he wants a normal life, but
right.
Fate decreed otherwise. He's kind of locked in this most dangerous game, where immortals are going around beheading each other, taking their knowledge and strength and power, and they're trying to survive, be the last one, so that they can kind of I guess the thing is to rule mankind. And they're always talking about you don't want it to be somebody evil, you want it to be somebody like Duncan or Connor. So yeah, Tessa, I love her character, Alexandra Vandernoot.
Yes,
I thought she was great. And
honestly, we had to talk about this before we get too deep in the weeds on the characters. We got to mention, because you brought this up, in process of digging, trying to understand why the Highlanders are all after each other, what the end goal is. Now, this is what I uncovered. In the Highlander universe, the origin of the Immortals is unknown. Supposedly, they don't know where they come from, even the creators of this thing. Maybe they come from the source, but it is not yet known what the source actually is. An attempt to explain the origin of the Immortals was made in the theatrical version of Highlander 2: The Quickening, which revealed that Immortals are aliens from the planet Zeist, which I did not see coming. This was edited out of the 1995 director's cut Highlander 2: The Renegade version, in which the Immortals are from Earth but from a distant past. Neither of the two versions is mentioned in later movies or the TV series. So, dude, the creators have no idea. And, dude, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if I should be upset at that or if I'm okay with it. Like, if you don't know where the story is or where it come from, then how do you write it? I mean, I guess I'm jaded by, modern day Hollywood. A lot of these TV series, they know from day one where they want to go, and they script it out and just take you along for the ride. But evidently, these guys don't even know the root of this thing. I mean, do you find that surprising or what?
Yeah, I do. But at the same time, because of the series, I'm such a fan of the series that I forget about the game while I'm watching it.
Right.
And I just focus on the real life situations. I was just thinking that the other day, when I watch the series, I kind of forget about, Immortals are locked in this deadly game of combat, and I just get interested in the situations of the characters. Because it's 6 seasons, I guess you have enough time to maybe it slips your mind. But yeah, and here's an interesting fact about myself. Because of stories I've heard of Highlander 2: The Quickening, I've never watched it because I remember a mutual friend of ours that we used to work with. He told me a little bit about it, and I told him I'd never seen it, and he says, "Yeah, you're probably better off not watching it." And he, just I don't know. Some movies, when I hear things, I'm just like, well, maybe I don't want to see it. It might taint it a little bit,
Yeah, no, I feel that. It's like you've got this image in your head, how the show makes you feel, how the Highlander universe plays to you, and what it means to you in your own life. And you don't, like you said, you don't want to taint it. You don't want to put a bad taste in your mouth. I totally get that. I've been like that with other properties as well. But dude, I agree with you, man. You don't really think about the game. You don't really think about all of that stuff. They mention it a lot because it's who the character is, honestly. But at the same time, it's not, the driving force. The basic theme of the show is this guy and his close inner circle of friends are just trying to live this normal life. And honestly, this show becomes similar to The Flash in a lot of ways because it's this guy. He's the hero. He's got a close circle of friends who know who he is, know what he is, and try to help him. And he, in turn, is trying to protect them. And every week, it's the villain of the week, which was season 1. There's quite a bit of that. There's a villain of the week, which is fine because that's what you expect a superhero TV show to be. Every week, he has a new threat, a new villain he has to dispose of, except on this particular superhero genre TV series. He's killing these cats. Very few escape alive when they cross Duncan MacLeod. It's kill or be killed for the Highlander for sure.
Yeah, great analogy. I wasn't even thinking about the Flash, but it's a good comparison. And I love the fact that some of his people close to him know about his true, know about his secret life, I guess you could say. That's always intriguing to me. Kind of like those characters. I guess they're representing the viewer. I guess you could say.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's sort of you're coming into that world and you're discovering who's who and what's what. I get that. And honestly, if the bit about the Highlanders can sense each other's presence, if that was not a fact, or at least part of the mythos of this character, then it would never make any sense why every episode this guy's in one location, not traveling the world, but the Highlanders, the Immortals just keep finding him, which would not be possible. You're like, how is it coincidence that every single week another Immortal, right? But
yeah.
That particular plot device of, oh, well, they just sense each other. That it's a cop out, but it works. I can't get too mad at that. It makes sense.
And honestly, you can't say that every episode he faces another Immortal. Some shows they take a break from that, and it's just like it's maybe a mortal who has bad intentions, that Duncan has to stop. And I like that. I mean, every episode facing another Immortal, a bad guy Immortal, it can get old, but sometimes he has to take care of, business with humanity, and I like that.
Yeah, and really that's him connecting with humanity. That's, despite what wackadoodle theories might be out there about where all these guys and gals actually came from to begin with, the fact is that he's here regardless. He's been here for 400 years when this show begins. And, at that point, it's like, I'm one of you. I mean, yeah, I'm different, but I didn't start out that way. I mean, he achieved immortality in the year 1622, if you do the math. So, at that point, he stops aging. Everything stops. And basically, he cannot die unless he is beheaded. And there you go. And then when that happens, a whole other process happens. I mean, that's where the science fiction aspect of this show comes into play. And if I say Aaron told you that I completely understood every single thing about it, I'd be lying. So before I let you school the folks listening, because I know you can, let's go over this. The rules, okay? The Immortals do not live as a united people on a territory of their own, but are scattered around the world and across history. The only bond between them are oral traditions called the rules, transmitted from teacher to student. The creator of the rules is unknown. So here we go again with that. We don't know who did it, right? Rules. Who's behind this? I don't know. The rules are never enumerated like a body of laws, but they are quoted according to the circumstances. They are taught to newborn immortals by immortal mentors called first teachers, and the main rules are these. No immortal may fight on holy ground, no matter who regards it as holy. Immortal combat is one-on-one only, no outside interference. Mortals must not learn about immortals. If you are killed, you move on. When only a few are left, all immortals will feel drawn to a distant land to fight for the prize. This is the time of the gathering. In the end, there can be only one. The last one will receive all the power of the immortals who ever lived. Dude, that's huge. I mean, just dissecting that list alone will take you all day. Just trying to wrap your head around that. I mean,
oh yeah.
I don't know how many of these rules I've seen and heard so far, but as you started piecing this together, I mean, did it make you more intrigued about the story, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was like another facet to the show or the character, and and you mentioned that nobody knows who made up the rules. I actually like that because you don't know how long this game's been going on, maybe since the beginning of time, and like all other myths of the past, I think it's better. Maybe it's better that we don't know who came up with the rules. It's another mystery. It's kind of like maybe a godlike figure or something.
Man, but, you could really go deep with that, couldn't you? You could really go, supernatural with that thing if you wanted to.
Yeah. I love the fact that there's no fighting on holy ground. That's kind of got the spiritual aspect to it there. Like even the worst of immortals will respect, the dead and their their territory. That's another chance for say like a character like Duncan MacLeod and say an Xavier St. Cloud, which was played by the lead singer of the Fine Young Cannibals. You remember that group?
Oh, of course. And I just watched that episode. That was number 15, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just say that, for sake, that's a chance for them to talk. And you get to, I don't know, maybe, of course, Duncan's, probably going to say, I'm going to stop you, Xavier. But Xavier's probably of course, going to come back and just maybe laugh, sneer and say, see if you can. But it's a great chance for, two sides of the coin to come together and kind of, prepare for battle maybe later on. And also, I don't know if you knew this or not, immortals cannot have children.
I did not know that, but I pieced that together because it was number 15 or 14, maybe 13, where he's talking about this with Tessa. And basically she's talking about, because it was the girl that got mixed up in the drug deal gone bad, and she had a daughter, right? And Tessa was looking after her and then was upset near the end, saying it kind of felt like she was mine. He's like, without saying it, he basically said, you could still have that if you want. It's not too late for you. And she's like, no, I love you. This is where I want to be. And then I was like, wait a minute. I bet he can't reproduce.
Yeah, that's it. And that was a really great part of that episode. Tessa kind of grows attached to that little girl. She's cute. Of course, anybody would. And, right then and there, she wants to be a mother, but then again, she has a life with Duncan, and she's sacrificing being a parent for that. So, she must really love Duncan a lot. And, like you said, Duncan's giving her a chance to go have a normal life. He's willing to give up one of the biggest loves of his, 400-year life for, he's willing to be that honorable. And I love that about the character, man. That's awesome.
And, this is the part of this show where, nerds like us tend to read way too much into a simple TV show. But I can't help it. It's my nature, all right? But because we've had weird conversations similar to this for years. The whole idea of an immortal. And this is not the first and only property to do this. There's been other things through the years, movies, TVs, comic books, of course, for generations. It seems like we've talked about the possibility of immortals and what happens, and but if you really dive into this, it's got to be the most lonely existence ever. For any character in literature is a character that cannot die, because obviously Highlander can, right? Obviously he can, but I'm saying, if you're that good and you're that confident, and by the way, you've got all this strength and all this knowledge after years of being in these duels, you're really, really hard to kill if you're Duncan MacLeod by the time 1992 comes around. You're almost impossible to kill, at least by, another immortal taking your head off. You can be killed by immortal, you can be blindsided, you can be shot, stabbed, whatever, burned alive, I guess. But for the head to be removed, good luck, because like I said, he's been doing this for a long time. For generations, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the loneliness factor in it.
Yes.
I thought the same thing. Some people say, I'd like to live forever, but then again, I don't know. If people around you, die, you have to watch them die. That's horrible. And I don't know how. I love the show, but I don't know how the character, keeps going sometimes. You got to be. You got to be tough as nails to still have that humanity about yourself, and then watch those around you die. Yeah.
And I guess honestly, you do one of two things. If you're in a universe such as this, you either draw close to humanity like Duncan has done, because he's realized, no matter when my time comes, I want to live this life and I want to live it on my terms. Or you go the other route, which says, these people are here for my entertainment. You will all be dead. And dead for a long time, and I will still look like this. 100 years from now, I will still look the same, and I'll outlive everybody here. and I'm that confident, and I'm that cocky. So at that point, human mortal life becomes irrelevant to you and becomes inconsequential, and you are the king of all you see. I mean, that's how a villain is made. And maybe that guy or gal didn't set out to become that, but after years of, like you said, loneliness and seeing your friends and family die, people you love, your children grow old and grow older than you and die in front of your eyes in an old folks home, for goodness sake. I mean, that's, at some point you say, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm never going to have contact again. And if anybody gets in my way, I'm just going to take them out. It's crazy.
Exactly. I'm glad you made that point. And there are immortals like that on the show who hold life cheap. You know, they just don't care anymore. Humanity is there for, you know, their enjoyment, you know, and forget about them. You know, it's all about, you know, me and what I can get from this world.
Absolutely. And just as a footnote to, we were explaining before the rules in the game and such. Now, wherever they come from, the Highlander franchise assumes that there have always been immortals on Earth well before the beginning of civilization. In the first film, the narrative starts from the dawn of time we came, moving silently down through the centuries, living many secret lives. And in Highlander Endgame, Connor's narrative says, in the days before memory, there were the immortals. We were with you then, and we are with you now. Which really takes this thing beyond the realm of all believability at some point. And you're right that we're focusing on the series and watching the course of the series. It's easy to forget the overall narrative. But man, just imagining that these immortals were here long before anyone else was. Like, at that point, it's God or it's an alien. They didn't just, what they evolved from, there's no one to evolve from, right? So that's,
yeah.
If I think about it too much, it'll blow my mind. So, but you got to give him points on originality, dude. Because at the time, who was doing anything like this in the mid 80s, late 80s to early 90s? Really nobody. I mean, honestly, not on this level.
Right.
So,
and although I love the series, you know, much more than the film, I give credit and respect to the film, because without it, you know, we would not have had the series. So I gotta tip my hat to the film.
Absolutely. Now, you can't talk about Tessa without talking about your favorite character of all time, Richie Ryan. I say that jokingly because he's not my favorite character thus far. And they've tried from episode 1 to, first they showed him as this punk kid, this smart mouth. And then they try to show him as he's sort of growing up in front of you and maturing. And he works for them and the antique shop. And he gets his own job, and he gets embroiled in all kinds of trouble and different adventures with them and without them sometimes. And Duncan has to constantly bail them out. And I'm telling you, you and I have already talked about this, but Tessa and Richie are Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen to me. And Duncan is Superman, always having to save their neck. If there's one, I don't want to say criticism, if there's one negative I maybe could throw it at any of this so far as I'm watching the show, it gets to be a little bit old hat after a while, if I'm being honest.
Well, yeah, I wasn't even thinking about the analogy you made with the Superman universe, but when you mentioned it, I was like, well, you know, he's got a point. Yeah, Richie, supposedly he's a troubled kid, been on the streets most of his life. He doesn't know who his real parents are. I think that's actually right. His mother died when he was very young, and he doesn't know who his father is. They have an episode, I think it's the second episode, where they try to explain that, but they don't. You know, I kind of feel bad for Richie, the way they portray him. He's an orphan, moved around from orphanages, been on the streets. He's kind of, you know, a troubled kid. And he almost gets himself killed in the first episode.
Right. When
he breaks into Duncan and Tessa's antique shop. And Duncan thinks that he's an immortal because there is another immortal nearby. He played Bull on Night Court.
Richard Mole.
Series back
Richard
in the 80s.
Mole, yes.
Yes. Yeah. And Duncan takes Richie to be this immortal who is breaking into the shop. And he's like, I remember that line. He says, I am Duncan MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, and you are dead. And I was like, whoa. So, yeah, right off, Richie's peeing in his pants, you know,
right.
And he says, whoa, wait a minute. Says, hey, dude, I'll pay for the window I just, destroyed. And, hey, here, you can have this back. He was getting ready to take some kind of old, valuable antique or something. So, yeah, right off the bat, you realize that Richie, he's not a good all-American boy. He's a little troubled. But by the end of the episode, after Duncan's, saved the day, as you say.
See?
Yeah. He and Connor are having a little conversation, and Connor says, "But boy, we'll need some looking after." And Duncan says, "Yeah, I know. I'm going to do it." And so it's kind of like Duncan takes on the role of, like a foster father. He and Tessa take Richie in to try to turn him into a better person, I guess you could say. Maybe some of their goodness will rub off on him, which does happen. And he actually accepts them and accepts their gracious hospitality, and he goes on a new journey in his life.
Oh, dude, I'd work for him. I'd hang out with him all day long. Especially, I mean, who do you make friends with? The most capable, physically tough guy you can find. That's who you make friends with. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to this guy watches my back. I never have anything to fear. Plus, I'd stay out of trouble. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. Yeah, you love the character. I'm indifferent to this kid, but he was portrayed by Stan Kirsch from the first episode up until season 5, and I already know kind of what happens. But if folks are out there have not watched, I'll leave that up to their own devices. They can figure it out as they go. Footnote here, pretty tragic. Kirsch actually took his own life in January of 2020. So I will say this for him: he brought that character to life. And you've got Queen soundtrack, which is fantastic, obviously. But then you've got some other music that's not Queen, that's not so great, and some of the hairstyles and the clothing, which are, it's with the times, it's with the 90s. So you watch it with the eyes of 2020, you're like, But at the time, it fit right in. It was perfect. It's kind of like watching something from the 80s now, where you're like, holy God. You know what I mean? It was a different time back then, but
we lived through it, so at the time, it didn't really seem weird to us. It was just part of, our regular culture then. And, I want to talk about some of the special guest stars from the world of music and, of course, from one of our favorite genres, wrestling. I think you had Joan Jett.
Yes.
From Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. I'm glad she didn't quit her day job because, she did okay, but, it wasn't great. And then, of course, you had Vanity, who I believe she was Prince's girlfriend at one time.
She was, yes. Prince discovered her, and she became the lead singer of Vanity 6. So, yeah.
Yeah, she was in an episode. Of course, she was not immortal as Joan Jett was. Joan Jett was an immortal. And one of the immortals that Duncan did not behead.
That's right.
Sorry if I'm spoiling anything, but, the fight ends, and I think Richie has kind of taken a liking to, I think her name's Felicia Martin, the character's name.
Yes. And
kind of stops Duncan from, delivering the killing blow. And he says, if you ever cross me again, I won't hesitate.
But, what's funny is, as I'm watching the episode, I'm like, gosh, she looks a lot like Joan Jett. And I can be honest with you, I did not know. I actually had the show playing in the background as I was working on the podcast here and doing some other things and had background noise, and I'm watching it out of my peripheral. And I'm like, not a bad episode so far. Not the best actress I've ever seen. Man, she looks familiar. And then it wasn't until after it was over, I'm like, oh my God, it was Joan Jett. So I'm with you. Maybe don't quit your day.
I love rock and roll, baby.
Yes.
But yeah, Vanity actually played like the love interest of another immortal who had come into crosshairs with Duncan a few years earlier. And I kind of like that episode too, because they kind of, get you going, get you a little confused, get you going in circles. You don't know if it's one thing or another. So, I like that. Also, before I get to the rowdy one, let me mention the great Roger Daltrey from the band Who plays a great reoccurring character, Fitzcairn, in the series. He's one of Duncan's closest friends, maybe his closest, and I think he does a fantastic job on the show. To be not to be an actor but a musician, I thought he came in and did admirably.
I agree with that, and he had done things. I don't know that he did things before this, but I know he's done things since then. And Mick Jagger has dabbled a little bit. Keith Richards has dabbled a little bit. So David Bowie, as we know, was a tremendous actor and did great in the few roles that he did have through the years. So there was a precedent there for some of the rock guys to sort of cross over into mainstream acting. But I'm with you, and plus, Daltrey looks the part as well, I have to say.
Yeah, and again, he's got that international aspect to him. He's of course, he's British, and I think he complements Duncan very well. And also, as his character comes back to the show, he becomes more humorous. I like that. He begins to loosen up, and you get a little comic relief there. Some of the situations he gets Duncan in, it's hilarious.
When you're talking about the guest cast, you got to talk about Piper, because I've not gotten there yet. Tell me how cool he is in this show.
Oh, he is. You know how he is in wrestling.
Of
his
course.
Character in wrestling. He is that charismatic in the episode that he appears in. And for instance, I'll give you an example. Of course, he's an immortal. And guess what his teacher's name was? Harry Hogan.
I knew you were going to say, I knew it was going to be Hogan without a shadow of doubt. Shut up.
Yeah, I was just reading that. I'd forgotten it. I was reading that, and it said it was a little, jab at his character in wrestling. Of course, he and Hogan were at odds for years and up north in Vince's company. But, yeah, getting back to the episode that he appears in, Piper's character has just been a very, very bad boy, and he rolls up in this black car with tinted windows, so you can't see him until he rolls the window down, and Duncan's standing there waiting. And as you see the window roll slowly down, Piper's got this big grin on his face. Oh man, it was awesome.
If you can't tell, folks, when you're a pro wrestling guy, it's cool to see pro wrestlers do other stuff, okay? Because there was once upon a time, there was no Rock, there was no Cena, there was no Batista. It wasn't exactly, wrestlers had done stuff. Terry Funk did, like you said, Hogan had done some stuff. Here and there, Piper had done some things. But, it was just kind of a handful of guys, right? But to see Piper, man, and especially because he was such a natural at acting, and honestly, I think for the second half of that guy's life, I think he could have been one of the best action heroes or comedic action heroes of all time. I really believe that.
I agree, and again, seeing these celebrities come in from other walks of life, that's also something that made me love the show even more. It always happens when you see somebody from another area come over into this, this different area. It's interesting. You want to watch, you want to see how they're going to do. And Piper was natural. The sword fight he and Duncan had I think it was in an amusement park. And actually, I think there was an accidental cutting of one of the actors in that sword fight. I think Adrian Paul might have got cut in that fight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, of course I think, of course it was unintentional, but, to have a wrestler come in and you think, well, it would be a wrestler, wouldn't it?
Right, of course.
Yeah.
He stiffed him.
But, yeah. Of course, we've mentioned the quickening. It's when, after one immortal has won the sword fight, he has beheaded his foe, and he's going to receive his power and his strength and knowledge. The quickening is, I love the quickenings. That's another one of my favorite parts of the show. And Adrian Paul, most of his quickenings, he was, great the way he did it. But you see the lightning come and things around him, like lights and stuff flicker. The electricity is kind of going in and out. I think it lit up the amusement park and made all the rides start to run. So that was great.
Man, that's awesome. And you're right. It's a nice touch to the show and to the characters. And, as we got into the show, and of course it's not taking place in the past. There's flashbacks. Duncan has flashbacks to different points in history and his history. And sometimes in American history, we see the Civil War, we see the American Revolution, we see him in England, we see him in a lot of other places. But you kind of get the sense that in 1992, it's sort of, I guess what you'd say, modern civilization, technology is much better. At some point, you can't really hide anymore. He manages to do it. He's hiding in plain sight, I guess, but there's a few different episodes where the cop in question or someone mentions, hey, there was an electrical storm and it's, this has happened before. And you're like, uh-oh. I kind of get the feeling, and I got it quite a bit here in season 1, where it kind of felt like they're getting closer. It's almost like they're getting closer to him. And I don't know if that ever plays out. I'm sure I'll find out as the show goes on, but I'm just thinking if putting it in a real world setting, at some point there'd be somebody that would start putting things together and saying, I think there's something with this guy, which, as I said, that might be coming down the road.
Yeah. Just continue, go on and watch. And you may I think you'll get some answers to your questions.
Foreshadowing.
Yes, I love that. There's another character that I want to talk about. He became Duncan's kind of like mentor. His name is Darius. He first appears in an episode called Band of Brothers. Mm-hmm. He's on holy ground. He's been on holy ground for centuries, because he's pretty much given up the game. He's a man of God.
Yes.
Really spiritual. And I think he and Duncan first met on the battlefield of the Napoleonic Wars. And it's snowing, and they bump into each other. Duncan's actually carrying a wounded man on his shoulder, and he draws his sword and introduces himself, and then Darius introduces himself, and he says, "You won't be needing that." And I thought that was a great first meeting between those two. And also Darius, there's a great line in that scene where he's trying to convince Duncan, you shouldn't be taking part in this. And Duncan says, "Well, I was raised a warrior." So when battles come about, I choose sides that I think are right. And then Darius comes back at him with something about like, I wonder what these dead men think about patriotism, now. They've been robbed of their most precious gift. And I was like, wow, that was great writing.
And I love the idea of this guy because it's something different. It's not, not every immortal is out for blood. To that point, I don't know that we'd seen anyone but Duncan. You could just refresh your memory if you need to, but Duncan was the one that's like, look, I could be out there doing this. I don't want to do it. I'll fight my battles as they come, but I just want to have a normal life. And like you said, here's Darius, who's this man of God who gave all that up a long time ago. That's a refreshing change of pace for this show for sure.
He's a recurring character, but unfortunately, I think it was, I was watching the extras, and they said that they couldn't bring the character back because the actor that played him died of like an aneurysm or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had some kind of medical problem, and, I hated to hear that because he did such a great job with that character, and it didn't get to, play it out. Of course, what happens in real life, happens on screen, unfortunately, and but I guess it makes for a good tribute to him as an actor.
Absolutely, and Darius, portrayed by Werner Stocker, actually died on May 27th, 1993 of a brain tumor. The episodes Unholy Alliance and Unholy Alliance Part 2 are dedicated to him. So, and honestly, his portrayal as Darius was absolutely well received by the fans, by the critics, by everybody involved. And he did, we mentioned the word humanity in this show, in this episode about this show, and it very much fits. And dude, you have to have that. You have to have characters who bring this thing down to earth, because if you don't, the whole show becomes nothing more than science fiction. And science fiction is fine, but you have to have the human element or no one's going to be able to connect to this thing in the slightest. So he was a very important part of the show, obviously.
And I'm glad you mentioned the human element. I keep saying, that's another thing that drew me to the show. But, yeah, that was a very critical part, having human everyday life going on around and not a lot of strange stuff happening out in the open. Let's just keep that kind of like in shadows or whatever, like the Immortals do. They don't fight their battles for public consumption. They pick a place, it's quiet, and it's nobody else is around. That's where they go at it. But yeah, I was really sad to hear about Warner Stalker's untimely death, while the series was going on, because he didn't get a chance to come back and play that character, and I don't know how the show would have gone on with him on there, but they did their best. I think they did their best to try to give Duncan another mentor after that, but it wasn't the same.
You're right, absolutely. It totally, I can't say it totally changed the pace, but it did. You could feel the impact of his absence from that point on. And speaking of the cast, we have to mention a few other regulars here. Amanda Weiss as reporter Randy McFarland, who I have to admit I'm not in love with. I found her to be flighty. I found her to be a little bit unrealistic, and no disrespect to the actress in question, but I wasn't compelled by this character at all. I think what Tessa's the character Tessa brought to the show, I don't believe the character of Randy brought anywhere near that. You may have a different take on that, but her character at this point's not doing much for me.
No, I agree with you there. I really didn't care for her. I think the show could have done without it. She comes off as this annoying reporter who just wants a story, and she keeps following McLeod and his inner circle around, as you say, looking for just that. And she kind of comes close to figuring out who Duncan really is, but never happens. But I don't really care for her. Could have done without it.
Absolutely. Philip Aiken as Charlie DeSalvo, Michael Moto as Maurice Lalonde, Lisa Howard as Ann Lindsay, Elizabeth Grayson as Amanda, Peter Wingfield as Mythos. Mythos, yes. Yeah. As I said, I've not gotten that far in, folks, so I'm learning some of this stuff as I research it, for sure. One of my favorite characters who has been, I can't remember how many episodes we're talking about. He's not the same cop that we met in I want to say episodes, first maybe 1 to 3 episodes, I guess. It's Tim Reed, who of course was Venus Flytrap in WKRP in Cincinnati. He was also Downtown Brown on Simon and Simon. I'm a big fan of this guy. He's been around for years and years in Hollywood. He portrayed Ray Bennett, the primary cop of the show. A definite upgrade from the guy they had before, no disrespect. But, Tim Reed's got some serious acting chops. I can't say I love the idea of the fedora on a cop in 1992. Right.
Yeah.
But
little old-fashioned, I would agree, yeah.
I like
thought
fedoras. I have
myself.
a fedora. Don't get me wrong, but still.
But, yeah, he was definitely a great addition to the show, no doubt.
I still, to this day, Venus Flytrap, one of the most iconic TV characters of all time, and Dr. Johnny Fever right beside him. One of these days we might do a WKRP show, folks. Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll get there. So, as a kid growing up, I loved that show, but I digress. But, yeah, he was absolutely a great addition to the show. And we got to jump into this, and I'm on episode, what episode am I on? It's real life, folks. Episode 18 now of season 1. So I got 4 more left. Woohoo! And then I'm on to season 2. In season 2, we meet the Watchers. I know little to nothing about this, but we had Jim Burns as Joe Dawson. I recognize this actor from doing other things in Hollywood. I know I've seen his face in other projects before, film and TV, both, I'm sure. Talk about Dawson. What did he bring to the show, and did he bring something different? And honestly, from what I've read and researched, it opened up a whole other side of the Highlander mythology.
I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly what I was going to say. The Watchers. Jim Burns as Joe Dawson, great character, man, and he opens up a whole new universe, or world, if you may, to the Highlander universe. These immortals are, throughout history of going around having these battles and, these lives. Well, what if there was somebody there to record it? A historian, if you will. That's who the Watchers are. They are there to observe and record, but not to interfere. And I thought that was awesome. It was almost like somebody peeking from the shadows, like, wait, I didn't know they were there. And Duncan, of course, Duncan's the one to discover the Watchers. It would be Duncan, of course, but
right.
And Joe Dawson just happens to be his Watcher. These Watchers are assigned to specific immortals. That's another aspect, another layer. And of course, they're not supposed to interfere, but you know how things go. Like you have rules. Rules are, going to be broken sometimes. So, of course, a little foreshadowing there. Sometimes these Watchers get involved when they shouldn't. But I thought it was great.
So I love the idea, and it goes along with what we said earlier, that the guys behind this had no idea what they were doing until they wrote as they went. And it was a real ongoing creative process. It wasn't, okay, here's what we have, here's where we want to go, and here's how we get here. It was more like, I could just imagine a meeting like, hey, I got an idea. What if there was a bunch of dudes watching these guys kill each other and stuff? And it's like, hey, that's a good idea. And they just ran with it. Not saying it's not a good idea, but it's crazy how some of this stuff just kind of takes shape literally from out of nowhere.
Yeah, kudos to whoever came up with the idea for the Watchers. And I mean, honestly, if you think about it, wasn't there a group called the Watchers in the Marvel Universe? Is that right, or
yes.
am I wrong?
Uatu the Watcher, the dudes with the big heads and the capes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's possible that they could have borrowed from that. I mean, I don't know.
That's true. And they were the purveyors of the What If line of books. And it was, only the Watcher knows. The Watcher just observes. He can't get involved, which I know that changed in an issue or two of the books, I'm sure, at one point or another. But it's basically just a what if scenario. These are the characters that you know, but imagine what if this had happened. And like you said, they just watch things unfold, and they're not really doing much of anything about it. So there's a whole other, commentary on that you could have that says, look, you could have prevented deaths. You could have helped people. You could have stopped some of this pain and suffering, but you did nothing. So, not that necessarily applies to the Highlander series here, but just overall with characters of that sort, it does open up a whole other plethora of topics and conversation pieces, which can make any property more dynamic. So I'm like you, I love the idea of that concept, which is something, like you said, we've definitely seen before.
And when you get to the episode, and when you'll know when Duncan realizes it, like you said, it's like it's a mind-blowing thing. It opens up a whole new world. The way they do it, like the camera work on that scene, yeah, it's perfect.
So I'm just imagining him explaining to him who he is and showing flashbacks of Duncan doing these things, and he's in the shadows watching. Like, that's good stuff, man.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Like, we're busy fighting each other to the death. There can be only one, and there's a dude back there in a trench coat with a notepad or something,
Yeah.
So that's good stuff. So we mentioned Amanda, and this comes from Highlander the Raven. So tell me about this.
Yeah, Amanda, played by Elizabeth Grayson. She plays kind of Duncan's on-off love interest. Of course, she's an immortal. She's a female immortal. And they go into flashbacks, like they have the origin of her and Duncan meeting. And I think I told you that there was another character that resembled another character from the DC universe. She's one. She's pretty much like the Catwoman.
Oh.
She's a little shady. Jewel thief. Her and Duncan have this, I don't know, real dynamic. It's kind of like Batman and Catwoman.
Right.
But I think as the series goes along, she changes and evolves, and Duncan's goodness kind of rubs off on her. And I remember one episode where Duncan is feeling so guilty about something he's done in his past. He's being reminded of by another immortal in the present. She has to go and remind him of who he really is, and just to bring him back to reality. I think she says, "You make everybody else around you better." And I was like, wow, that's awesome.
That's good. That's a good line. And I'm looking at her picture. I'm looking at the actress' picture in this role. She's got the white hair, and I immediately think Zealot from Wildcats. That's the first character I think of.
She actually didn't start out with that color of hair. It was dark, about the same length, though. But, yeah, I remember the writers talking about they never knew what to expect from Elizabeth Grayson when she would come back to the show and do an episode. So sometimes she'd have her hair dyed, she'd have a nose piercing. It's like we never knew what to expect from her.
Elizabeth Ward Grayson, American actress, who actually won the title of Miss America in 1982. So there you go, folks.
I did not know that.
So she's beyond purdy, folks, is what we're trying to say. So
she, she went on to do a spinoff Highlander called Raven after the Highlander series ended.
Yes.
And I watched a few episodes and I couldn't get into it.
Oh, really?
It's not because it just wasn't. It was pale in comparison to what Adrian Paul did as Duncan MacLeod, but I don't know. I couldn't get into it, and I think it only lasted one season. So I guess from what I'm saying, other people felt the same way.
Right. Yeah, that might be something I check out when I'm done with this, just to see what kind of feel I get for it. But yeah, so I'm curious because I didn't get this far into it. Was there any explanation as to how many female immortals there were, or was that even brought up in the show at that point?
Yeah, they really didn't talk about that. They had very few female immortals, from what I remember, throughout the series. But of course, the ones that they did have were, all attractive for some reason. Yeah, I remember it's like I'm watching the shows now. And my mom's watching them, and she says, "Are there any female immortals?" And right when we were getting ready to watch the one with Joan Jett, and I said, "Yeah, this has got one in it."
Right.
Yeah, there's a little similarity there. The short, dark hair, mysterious personality.
Right. Yeah. It's a different spin. It's a different look. It's a different. When you have a universe like this, and we've seen it through the years with Marvel and. Even with like the Alien universe, you can spin things out of that. You can these days it's all the rage. I mean, it's all about creating an extended universe, a multiverse of characters, and this property begets this property, which begets this property. Next thing you know, you've got 5 different shows under one umbrella of this particular universe. It's kind of the same deal, but they were doing this in the 90s with this show and with this property, so it's pretty cool stuff.
Oh yeah. Like the director and writer of the show said, we wish it was still going, and I was like, yeah, I agree. I wish it was still going at the time but of course not now. I mean, that would be ridiculous. I mean, Duncan, Adrian Paul has aged, of course, since, and it wouldn't make sense. He's not, mortals do not age.
Well, listen, I'm very glad you said that because we can't take this home or wrap this up in any way without saying, look, it's 2020. This thing has a massive cult following. Adrian Paul, by the way, believe it or not, still looks great. He doesn't look like Adrian Paul from 1992 because, like you said, he's aged. But by the way, he's aged very gracefully, if I'm being honest. No, he couldn't do the guy from 92. But man, as I said, it's 2020. This thing has a serious cult fan following. They're CG. They made Robert Downey look like he was 18 again. This is entirely possible. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility to see a new Highlander film or TV series. Tell me why this isn't happening with the fact that Hollywood revamps and relaunches and redoes and remakes, and a lot of times it's garbage, okay? But here it feels like is a ready, set universe, ready, set, go universe with established characters, themes, ideas, a history behind it. It seems ripe for the taking. Why not revisit this now?
I haven't thought about it, but you're right. I mean, they could do more with it now. I mean, better CGI technology. They could maybe bring out fresh ideas, like we talked about the Watchers, maybe, something like that, add something new to it. I don't know why they're, not making an attempt to put the refresher button on it. But, who knows? Maybe in the years to come, it'll happen. I want to mention another actor from the show who became a regular, Peter Wingfield as Mythos.
Yes.
He was very good on the show, in my opinion. And the actor, in an interview said, I think he was on a plane flight, going somewhere, and he got a call from his agent, and he his agent sent him some information, regarding the show, and he was reading it. It's like, immortals cutting heads off. It's like, very, very bizarre. But he came on the show, and he changed things again, kind of like the Watchers. He is one of the oldest living immortals currently on the show. Supposedly, he's like 3,000 years old. So he goes back to Egyptian times. And Duncan, after he discovers Mythos, or I think he and Joe were talking about it, and he tells Joe, he says, he's just a myth. I've heard about him, but he's just a myth. And then Joe says, no, he's real.
Wow.
Mythos, and it's a great name too. Play on words, because Duncan thought he was a myth, and then kind of sounds like Mythos. So there you go. And the guy, he delivered, every time he was on screen. Actually, I want to mention a scene that he and Duncan had in season 5, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. They're just come out of this television show. Actually, it was a trivia game, and Duncan's making a joke about the way he did, and Mythos says, so I'm a little slow on pop culture. He says, I know what Caesar had for breakfast, blah, 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 and then a bunch of other obscure things in history that nobody else would know. And I thought, man, that's awesome.
I can't wait to get to that, man. I'm nearing the end of season 1. It's pretty cool. I can't wait to get to season 2. And I forget which episode we said this about. Maybe the Star Wars episode. Dude, I feel like we've just scratched the surface of the show. I mean, it did run for 6 years. There's still a lot more to talk about, but I'm sure there's still a lot more to say. I mean, again, this is, I'm kind of at a loss for words, because there's a lot more, as I said, to still talk about. But this show is, listen, if you guys have never watched Highlander the series, you got to give it a chance. And if you've never watched the movies, you can start with the show. They'll fill you in as you go. And like we said before, man, the creators of this show sort of made it up as they went along. But for my money, one of the best sci-fi / fantasy / comic book genre type of TV series. I mean, the guys behind this show should be proud, as should Adrian Paul. I think it's pretty watchable. It's still, to this day, it's pretty freaking watchable, man.
I couldn't agree more. And I would encourage anybody that's interested in something new that they haven't seen before, check this out. I'm sure you can watch it on YouTube or Netflix, something like that. You don't have to go out and buy DVDs or anything, unless you just want to, do that. But at the time we didn't have stuff like YouTube and Netflix, so I went out and bought the DVDs. That's how much I loved the show.
Yes.
And
back when they were still crazy expensive too.
Yes, I remember. Yeah, one more story. I remember being at a Best Buy in a town nearby when season 6 came out, and I was there the day it came out. I had it in my hand, and I saw another guy there that had one in his hand, and I thought, man, that's cool. I was like, man, other people do like this. It's like, and the series, I believe that particular season was around $50 or $60, because it had just come out.
Oh yeah.
But, I was like, I gotta have it, so I'm paying that much.
Dude, those X-Files seasons on DVD, multiple discs, those things were like $100 a pop, man. At the time, and there's no way I'm paying. I love the X-Files, but there's no way I'm paying that. So I know when you started collecting into this show hot and heavy that you were buying all the seasons. But yeah, to Greg's point, folks, you can find the Highlander series, the entire series, all 6 years on IMDb. And if you have an Amazon account, you can watch IMDb. You can use your Amazon sign up free of charge to sign up through this. And I believe the IMDb app is free anyway. So there you go. You don't have to pay a thing. All you need is an internet connection and a way to watch it. So it's worth your time, folks. If you're a sci-fi guy like ourselves or gal and you're into this kind of thing, give it a chance. Don't let the fact that it's from 92 sway you. Don't let it ruin your perception of what this could be, because I'm telling you, it's pretty entertaining. So I know this is going to be tough for you because you're a huge fan of this, but dude, I got to ask, what's your last word on Highlander the TV series?
Well, I think like we talked about with Star Wars, to me it's timeless. And it fits because it deals with being immortal. So in a way, it's you could kind of say it's been immortalized in our pop culture, and I love the show. I'll never get tired of it. I won't watch the series like over and over again, like back to back. I mean, I'll wait a while.
Right.
In between watchings, of course, but I'll always come back to Highlander because it meant a lot to me and my dad, and we were close before, but it brought us even closer, and I just loved watching the episodes, bit by bit with my dad, and it was just a really special time in my life. I'll never forget it.
Well said, my friend, and we'll leave with this, the opening narrative that changed a couple different times during the course of this show, but this is the narrative from season 1 especially. I am Duncan MacLeod, born 400 years ago in the Highlands of Scotland. I am immortal and I am not alone. For centuries we have waited for the time of the gathering, when the stroke of a sword and the fall of a head will release the power of the quickening. In the end, there can be only one. Check out this show, folks. You won't be sorry. You get our full endorsement for sure. Enjoy. And that is Highlander, the series. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.